My dearest Margaret, I'm writing this because tomorrow morning we go into the jungle. They say only half of us will come back. I need you to know, if I don't make it, there's something I never told you about our wedding night.
He didn't make it back, but this letter did. And what James Thompson confessed in those pages changed everything his wife thought she knew about the man she married. This is the letter he wrote on their anniversary, June 12, 1943, Guadalcanal Island, the deadliest battlefield in the Pacific. It would take 3 months to reach her. By then, he'd already been dead for 12 weeks.
June 12th, 1943. Somewhere on Guadalcanal. Margaret, happy anniversary, my love. 2 years ago today, we stood in that little white church in Cedar Rapids. You wore your mother's dress. I wore that suit I borrowed from your father because I couldn't afford to buy one. Do you remember what you said when I fumbled the ring? When it slipped from my fingers and rolled under the first pew? You laughed. Right there at the altar, in front of everyone, you laughed and said, "Well, that's not a good omen, is it?" Everyone in the church held their breath. But you just smiled at me with those eyes and whispered, "Go get it, James, I'll wait." I crawled under that pew in my borrowed suit, fishing for that ring while Reverend Morrison tried not to laugh. Your mother looked horrified. My father was covering his face. But you just stood there, radiant, patient, smiling. When I finally got back up, covered in dust, sweating like a farm horse, you took my face in your hands and said, "I'd wait forever for you." God, Margaret, I think about that moment every single day.
James Thompson was 23 years old when he wrote those words. A private first class in the United States Marine Corps, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. He'd been on Guadalcanal for 7 months. 7 months of jungle combat, of heat that made men hallucinate, of malaria that killed more Marines than bullets did, of nights so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, listening to Japanese soldiers moving through the trees. The Battle of Guadalcanal officially ended in February 1943, but the Marines were still there, still fighting, still dying in skirmishes that never made the newspapers back home. James had arrived in November 1942, fresh off the boat, green, scared. He'd never fired his rifle at another human being. By June 1943, he'd buried 14 men from his unit. Tomorrow, he'd be number 15. But he didn't know that yet. Right now, sitting in a mosquito-infested tent with a pencil stub and a piece of paper, all James knew was that it was his anniversary. And he needed to tell his wife something he'd been carrying for 2 years. A secret. A confession. Something that had been eating at him since the day they got married.
Margaret, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Something that's haunted me every day since I left Iowa. The night before our wedding, I almost called it off. I know, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. But you need to know this. Especially if tomorrow. If I don't come back from what we're about to do, I can't die without telling you the truth. The night before the wedding, I sat in my truck outside your parents' house for 2 hours, engine off, just sitting there in the dark, staring at your bedroom window. I was terrified, not of marrying you, never of that. You are, the best thing that ever happened to me. I was terrified that I wasn't good enough for you. You were the pharmacist's daughter, smart, beautiful. You'd been to college for 2 years before your father got sick and you had to come home. You read books I couldn't understand. You knew things about the world I'd never even thought about. And me? I was a farm boy who barely graduated high school. I had dirt under my fingernails that never quite came clean. I smelled like cows and hay. My biggest accomplishment was fixing a tractor engine. What could I possibly give you that you deserved?
This wasn't unusual for James Thompson. He'd grown up poor. His father worked a small farm outside Cedar Rapids, 60 acres of corn and soybeans that barely fed the family. 3 brothers, 2 sisters, all crammed into a 4-room house with a leaky roof. James left school at 16 to help on the farm full-time. By the time he was 18, he had the shoulders of a man twice his age and the hands of someone who'd spent his entire life working. Margaret Pritchard was different. Her father owned Pritchard's Pharmacy on Main Street. The family lived in a 2-story house with indoor plumbing and a telephone. Margaret had gone to the state college for 2 years, studying to be a teacher. When James first worked up the courage to talk to her at a church social in the summer of 1940, he was convinced she'd laugh at him. She didn't. She smiled, asked him about the farm, listened when he talked about fixing engines, didn't flinch when she noticed the grease stains on his Sunday shirt. 3 months later, he asked her to dinner. She said yes. 6 months after that, he proposed under an oak tree by the river. She said yes again. But the night before the wedding, sitting in that truck outside her house, James Thompson was drowning in doubt. What if she woke up one day and realized she'd married beneath her? What if she regretted choosing him? What if he couldn't provide the life she deserved? He sat there for 2 hours, hand on the ignition, seriously considering driving away, starting the truck, heading west, disappearing, leaving her at the altar rather than trapping her in a life with a man who wasn't good enough.
I sat in that truck, Margaret, and I convinced myself that you'd be better off without me, that you deserved someone educated, someone with prospects, someone who could give you the life you were meant to have. I had my hand on the key. I was going to start the engine and drive, just disappear, and then your bedroom light turned on. I saw you through the window. You were in your nightgown, sitting at your vanity, brushing your hair, just like you always did before bed. Slow, methodical strokes, counting them, 100 brushes every night. You told me once it was something your grandmother taught you. I watched you for maybe 5 minutes. And then you did something that changed everything. You stopped brushing. You set down the brush. You picked up the photograph on your vanity, the one of us at the county fair, the one where I'm holding that ridiculous stuffed bear I won at the ring toss. You held that photo, and you kissed it. Just pressed it to your lips and held it there. Margaret, I don't know if you remember doing that. It was such a small thing. Maybe you do it every night. Maybe it was just that one time. But watching you kiss that photograph, watching you hold on to me even when I wasn't there, I realized something. You didn't love me because of what I could give you or what I could be. You loved me because of who I was. A farm boy with dirty hands and a borrowed suit. That was enough for you. So I turned off the ignition. I got out of the truck. And I walked home, and the next day I married you, and it was the best decision I ever made.
James Thompson married Margaret Pritchard on June 12, 1941. The wedding was small, 27 people. Reverend Morrison presiding. Margaret's mother cried through the entire ceremony. James's father clapped him on the back afterward and said, "You did good, son." They honeymooned for 3 days at a cabin on Lake Okoboji. Fished, read books, stayed in bed until noon, made promises about the future. James got a job at the John Deere plant in Waterloo. Margaret kept working at her father's pharmacy. They rented a house on Elm Street, 2 bedrooms, a porch, a yard with a maple tree. Life was good. For 6 months, life was perfect. Then came Pearl Harbor. James looked across the table at his wife of 6 months. She was reading the newspaper, coffee cup halfway to her lips. She didn't know yet. He knew what he had to do. "Margaret," he said, "I need to enlist." She set down her coffee cup, slowly, carefully. "I know," she said. That was it. No argument, no begging him to stay. Just, "I know." She understood. That's who she was. James enlisted on December 10th, 1941. 3 days after Pearl Harbor, he shipped out for basic training in January 1942. He'd been gone for 18 months now. 18 months of letters. 18 months of missing her. 18 months of wishing he could hold her just one more time. And now, sitting in a tent on Guadalcanal on their 2nd anniversary, James was about to go into combat again. A mission into the jungle. A mission his commanding officer had described as high risk, high casualty, which is military speak for most of you won't come back. James needed her to know the truth. About the wedding, about his doubt, about how she'd saved him without ever knowing it. Because if he died tomorrow, he wanted her to understand how much she meant to him. If you're finding James and Margaret's story powerful, this is what we do at the Letter Archive. Every single day we share real letters from real people who lived through history's most extraordinary moments. Letters from soldiers, diaries from wives waiting at home. Words written in the shadow of war, loss, and love. These voices deserve to be heard. Subscribe so you never miss a story, because every letter has a truth worth preserving. Now, let's continue with James's letter, because what he's about to confess next is even more devastating.
Margaret, there's more I need to tell you. Remember that fight we had the night before I shipped out? The one about the baby. You wanted to try for a child before I left. You said you wanted something of mine to hold on to if the worst happened. You begged me, you cried, and I said no. I told you it wasn't fair to bring a child into the world when I might not come back. That it would be too hard on you. That we should wait until the war was over. But that wasn't the real reason, Margaret. The real reason was I was afraid. Afraid that if you had my baby and I died, you'd be trapped. Tied to a dead man's memory for the rest of your life. I wanted you to be able to move on if something happened to me. I wanted you to be free to remarry, to find someone who could give you the life I couldn't, to be happy, and a child would make that harder. So I said no, and you cried yourself to sleep that night, and I held you and told myself I was doing the right thing. But Margaret, I need you to know, if I could go back, I'd change that answer. I'd give you a baby. I'd give you a piece of me that would live on even if I didn't. Because now, sitting here, knowing what's coming tomorrow, God, Margaret, I'd give anything to know that part of me was still in the world, still with you. I'm so sorry I robbed you of that. If you're reading this and I'm gone, please don't spend your life mourning me. Please move on. Find someone good. Have children. Be happy. That's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted. Just promise me one thing. Tell our children, the ones you'll have with someone else, tell them about the farm boy who loved their mother more than anything in the world. Tell them I existed. That's enough.
James sealed that letter and put it in his footlocker. He planned to mail it the next day, after the mission. If he survived, he'd throw it away. If he didn't, well, someone would find it and make sure it got home. But then something happened that James didn't expect. Around midnight, his tent mate, a corporal named Eddie Mason from Tennessee, sat down next to him. "You writing your girl?" Eddie asked. James nodded. "Anniversary letter, 2 years today." Eddie was quiet for a moment. Then, "You tell her everything?" James looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Did you tell her all the things you've been carrying? All the stuff we don't put in our regular letters because we don't want them to worry?" James hesitated. "Some of it. Not all of it, though." "No, not all of it." Eddie pulled out his own piece of paper and a pencil. "Write another one." "What?" "Write another letter. Tell her the rest. The stuff you're too scared to say. The worst stuff. The true stuff. Write it all down." "Why?" Eddie looked at him, really looked at him. "Because tomorrow we might die, James. And if we do, these letters are the only thing that's left of us, the only proof we were real, that we felt things, that we mattered. So write it. Write everything. Don't hold back. And when you're done, seal it up and write on the envelope. Don't open until you're ready. That way, if something happens to you, she'll get it eventually. But not right away, not when she's fresh grieving. She'll open it when she's strong enough to handle the truth." James stared at that blank piece of paper for a long time. Then he started writing.
"Margaret, if you're reading this, I've been dead for a while now. Months, maybe years. I told Eddie to seal this letter separately, to mark it open later, because what I'm about to tell you, I don't want you to read this while you're still raw from losing me. I need you to be strong first. I need you to have cried all your tears and started putting your life back together, because this letter is going to hurt. Margaret, I've killed men. 14 of them, that I know of, maybe more. I don't sleep anymore, not really. I close my eyes and I see their faces. Young men just like me. Japanese soldiers who probably had wives too. Mothers, children. I see the one I bayoneted at Edson's Ridge. I hear him choking on his own blood. I see the one I shot at point-blank range during a night raid. His eyes, God, Margaret, his eyes. I'm not the man you married anymore. That farm boy with the clean hands and the nervous smile, he's gone. I'm something else now, something broken, something that's seen too much and done too much and can't ever go back to being whole. I don't know if I'd even fit in Iowa anymore, if I could sit on our porch and drink lemonade and pretend this never happened. Part of me hopes I don't make it home, because at least then you'll remember me the way I was, young, hopeful, good. You won't have to see what I've become. You won't have to live with the nightmares, the rage, the guilt. You won't have to love a man who's already dead inside. So maybe it's better this way. Maybe it's a mercy if tomorrow is my last day. At least then I go out still believing I was doing something right, fighting for something good, protecting you. At least I don't have to come home and watch you realize you married a stranger. But Margaret, if somehow I do make it home, if I survive this war and come back to you, please be patient with me. Please don't give up on me. Please remember the boy in the borrowed suit, the one who crawled under the pew for your ring. He's still in here somewhere, I promise. I love you. Always, James.
James sealed the second letter in a separate envelope. He wrote on the outside, in careful block letters, "Margaret, don't open until you're ready. I love you." He put both letters in his footlocker. The first one he'd mail tomorrow if he survived. The second one would only be found if he didn't. Then James Thompson lay down on his cot and tried to sleep. He couldn't. None of them could. Because at 500 hours, 5 in the morning, they were going into the jungle. June 13th, 1943. 4 hours. James and his unit, 26 Marines from 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, gathered in the pre-dawn darkness. Their objective, clear out a Japanese position 5 miles inland. Intelligence said it was a small encampment. maybe 30 enemy soldiers. Quick in, quick out. Intelligence was wrong. The Marines moved into the jungle at 500, single file, weapons ready. James was fourth in line. Eddie Mason was right behind him. The jungle was alive with sound. Birds, insects, the rustle of leaves. But underneath all that noise was something else. Silence. The kind of silence that means someone is watching you. They walked for 2 hours. No contact, no signs of the enemy. Just endless green, oppressive heat and that terrible, waiting silence. At 0700 they reached the target area. No encampment, no 30 soldiers. Instead, they found a Japanese bunker complex, fortified positions, machine gun nests, mortar emplacements. This wasn't a small patrol. This was a battalion-strength position, maybe 200 enemy soldiers, and the Marines had just walked right into the middle of it. The radio operator took a round to the chest, went silent. No radio, no support, no way out. The Marines returned fire, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Outgunned, pinned down, men were dying, fast. James could see them falling, could hear them screaming, could smell the blood and gunpowder and burning jungle. This was it. This was how it ended. James thought about Margaret, about her standing at the altar in her mother's dress, about her kissing his photograph, about her crying the night before he left, about the baby they never had, about the letters in his footlocker waiting to be found. He thought, at least she'll know. At least she'll understand. Then Eddie grabbed his arm. James, we gotta move. We can't stay here. Move where? I don't know. Anywhere but here. The sergeant, a grizzled Marine from Texas named Crawford, was yelling orders. Fall back to the river. Move, move. The Marines started retreating, fighting their way backward through the jungle, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead. James ran. He fired his rifle, reloaded, fired again, barely aiming, just shooting at shapes in the trees. A Japanese soldier stepped out in front of him, close. So close James could see his face. Young, maybe 19, terrified. The soldier raised his rifle. James shot first. The soldier went down. 15. That was 15 men James had killed. He didn't stop to think about it. He kept running. They made it to the river. Half the unit was dead or wounded. 13 men left standing. They set up a defensive position and held. For 6 hours, they held that line while the Japanese tried to overrun them. James ran out of ammunition, switched to his sidearm, ran out of that too, picked up a dead Marine's rifle and kept firing. Eddie took shrapnel to the leg, kept shooting anyway. Crawford got hit in the shoulder, kept giving orders. They held. At 1400 hours, 2 in the afternoon, air support finally arrived. Navy Corsairs screaming out of the sky, strafing the Japanese positions. The attack broke. The enemy pulled back. The Marines held the river, but they'd lost 13 men, half the unit. Gone. James Thompson sat on the riverbank, covered in mud and blood, some his, some not, and stared at nothing. Eddie collapsed next to him. We made it. Holy hell, we made it. James didn't respond. He was thinking about the letters, about Margaret, about how she'd have to read them now, how she'd know everything. He was thinking about the boy he'd killed, the terrified 19-year-old whose face he'd never forget. He was thinking about how Eddie was wrong. They hadn't made it. Not really, because part of them had died in that jungle, the part that could go home and be normal again. That part was gone forever. James Thompson survived that day. He survived the rest of the Guadalcanal campaign, survived Tarawa, survived Saipan. He made it through the entire war, but he never sent the letters. He kept them, sealed, hidden in the bottom of his footlocker for 2 more years. Because the truth was, James was terrified. Terrified that if Margaret read what he'd written, the doubt, the guilt, the darkness, she'd leave him. So he stayed quiet. Came home in 1945, married Margaret all over again in spirit, tried to be the man she remembered, but the letters were always there, hidden, waiting, a truth he was too afraid to tell. November 3rd, 1993, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. James Thompson died that morning. Heart attack, 75 years old. Died in his sleep in the house he and Margaret had lived in for 50 years. Margaret was 74. They'd been married for 52 years. She found the letters 3 days later while going through his things. 2 envelopes, yellowed, sealed, hidden in the bottom of an old Marine Corps footlocker in the basement, both addressed to her, both dated June 12, 1943, 50 years old. Margaret sat on the basement floor and opened them.
She read about the night before the wedding, about James sitting in his truck, considering leaving, about watching her kiss his photograph. She read about the baby, about his fear of trapping her, about wanting her to be free. She read about the killing, about the nightmares, about the guilt. She read it all. And when she finished, she sat there in that basement surrounded by 50 years of life, photo albums, Christmas decorations, grandchildren's drawings, and she cried. Not because she was angry, not because she felt betrayed. She cried because for 50 years her husband had carried that weight alone. Margaret folded the letters carefully, put them back in the envelopes, and she made a decision. She donated them to the National Buiatu Museum because she knew James's story wasn't just their story. It was the story of millions of men who came home broken, who hid their trauma, who thought they had to be strong, who never told their wives the truth. Margaret wanted people to know. She wanted veterans to know they weren't alone. She wanted wives to know what their husbands had carried. She wanted the world to understand that war doesn't end when the shooting stops. It follows you home.
The letters are there now, at the National Buiatu Museum in New Orleans, preserved behind glass. Visitors read them every day. Veterans stand in front of those letters and cry. Because James wrote what they never could. Wives stand there and finally understand what their husbands went through. Young people read them and realize heroes aren't fearless. They're terrified, but they go anyway. Margaret Thompson died in 1995, 2 years after James, 86 years old. In her will, she left one instruction: bury her with the photograph, the one from the county fair, the one James saw her kiss through the window 54 years earlier, the one that saved him. James Thompson, 1918, 1993. Margaret Pritchard, Thompson, 1919, 1995. Married June 12, 1941. He almost left her at the altar. She loved him anyway. He hid his darkness for 50 years. She forgave him anyway. They're buried together now, side by side. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa. 2 headstones, 1 love story. Tomorrow we're sharing a letter that was found in a bombed apartment building in London. A young mother's diary from the Blitz. She wrote every night for 57 nights while the bombs fell. On the 58th night, they finally found her building. The diary survived. She didn't. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Letter Archive, because every letter deserves to be heard.